Hello and welcome to another installment of our series, Making the Right Moves. As you know, in this series, we're talking to women entrepreneurs, talking about access to finance, specifically how they raise funds for their company, and more broadly, asking them to share little tips that they have about not only accessing finance, but also running a business as a woman-owned company. So today I have the extreme pleasure to welcome Natalia Luis from M. Lewis Construction, which is an asphalt and construction company here in Maryland. They have gotten quite a few accolades and so on over the years. In fact, they're one of the major companies here in Maryland. And the reason they have reached to that stage is that they provide excellent products and first-rate client service. Natalia is co-CEO of the company. It's a woman-owned, multi-generational company. It's been recognized, as I mentioned before, in the field. It's a man's world, as you know, so to be recognized in such a field is quite an achievement. She's got decades of experience leading multi-million-dollar organizations from startup all the way to growth. She's received multiple awards, both locally and internationally, which stand as a testament to her success and her leadership. And she holds a double bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland, right here at home, in international business and marketing. And she's attended several Ivy League business programs over the years. So with that, I'd like to welcome you, Natalia. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Leslie. You are such a wonderful advocate, such an incredible leader to all of us in this area. And I'm incredibly grateful for you and thankful to be here. Not only do you recognize and emphasize businesses like mine, you're our advocate. And without angels like you, it would be a much, much more difficult road. So thank you, actually.
Good, you're welcome. And actually, I should add that we were happy to have you as a client in the CARES Act Strategic Consulting Fund program that I just closed off a couple of months ago, the City-Run program.
It was an extraordinary experience. I'm very, very grateful for it. And it really pivoted a portion of our business development strategy that we were looking to really execute on. Your program is really what launched it, and it continues today, and really, really looking forward to the outcomes of the work that we did together.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, okay, so let's go back a little bit and ask you sort of, how did you start your business? What was sort of the vision around launching what is really a challenging area, I think, for a woman, given the fact that construction is really dominated by men. And so you have to have a particular mindset to really make inroads into that kind of sector.
It is. Well, you know, as you had mentioned, it's a multi-generational company. So essentially, my sister and I are co-CEO of a family business where we formally, you know, my parents passed the baton. It was established in 1985 by my mom and dad, and they passed the baton officially in 2008. But that said, I can tell you how we launched a business because both my sister and I, it started at the kitchen table. So both my sister and I were very, very present for every bit of it. In fact, my sister is the one who walked down to the courthouse to fill in the application on behalf of my parents, because at the time they didn't actually know English. And so it started from very grassroots, very bootstrapped. In terms of, you know, the financial aspect, it was, they didn't really have a lot of money. They had some construction equipment, they had a pickup truck. That is all they had. And then they had a lot of heart, a lot of vision, and a lot of courage to proceed. And I, you know, although I am infinitely in admiration of what my mom and dad did. The fact is that people are doing that every single day, right? That is the story for the majority of small businesses in the United States of America, where they literally contribute 80% to our national GDP, right? And yet that is the normal story for a small business. In one iteration or another, there's never enough funding. There's never enough much of anything. There's heart, there's skill, and there's courage, and resiliency and grit. And that, you know, not only do you have it at the beginning, but you hone in on it throughout all of the years. So I wish I could take credit for it, because being a founder is the most courageous work of all. But my mom and dad actually get credit for that.
Great. But, you know, I think you're selling yourself short, because once they handed over the baton, you now have to take it and scale it to the next level, right?
Yeah.
So give us a flavor for that.
Well, you know, when my mom and dad were still in the business, Sadai and I, you know, if we were in school, we worked all summer, we worked all weekends. And then when we graduated from university, we came into the business and we worked full time, of course. So essentially when we started, it was really a very small concrete placement company. And, you know, after a couple of years, they asked us to start doing utility adjustments. And then after that, they started asking us to do asphalt patch. And, you know, the business grew organically. And for the first, I would say for the first 15 years of the business's life, it actually was, it grew at a fairly slow but stable rate. In that my parents really didn't believe in debt. They didn't really understand debt structure and credit structures. And so every time we bought something new, you know, we had to pay off a truck, and we couldn't have any more than that. So it was, you can imagine, very, very slow but stable growth. I mean, they could sleep at night, which, you know, there's something about that. You know, once Natalia and I came into the business and we realized that we could really make a difference. And we came into the business more because of the fact that we believed we could actually make an impact, and we could set a standard for what the expectations should be. And so we started taking larger work, right? We started getting into milling and then overlay, and then naturally it segued into asphalt manufacturing and aggregate recycling and millings. And now we have a really wonderfully vertically integrated organization where we can depend on ourselves along with our partners, obviously, but we have a good sound control of the most important parts of the work that we do, in that we manufacture the material, we have the milling and the paving crews, we have everything that organically we need to fully perform the work. What that brings is stability to an organization, and not only to ourselves, but to all those partners that we work with, whether it's our hauling contractors, our vendors, our suppliers. We end up creating impact in a way that is fairly magnificent. For instance, when we started working with our second asphalt plant, one of the things that we did is we went out to community, to both the WBE and the MBE community, and we said, Sadai and I really stated to our team and challenged our team to help us understand why the answer was no, i.e. the default would be to yes. And in terms of accessing credit, you know, that is access to credit is one of the most difficult things that a small business can you know, one of the most difficult challenges for a small business, because you may not have the financial history, you may not have a flowing cash flow element to the business. There may be any number of things as to why you don't fit into the financial matrix. And what we found with larger organizations such as asphalt manufacturers or concrete manufacturers was that really they use the same financial matrix that large banks do, right? And it is very hard to meet those covenants and all of the requirements in those matrices. So what we said to our team was, if you're going to say no, you're going to have to explain it to Sedalia and I, and it has to be a very good reason. Turns out we opened up 178 accounts for small businesses with an over 99% success rate. I'd say those are good odds. Yet shockingly, it still astounds me how difficult larger businesses make it for smaller businesses. I mean, not only is there the opportunity cost of smaller businesses not being able to purchase what they need, but really there's the developmental inequity, and it rolls, right? It's exponential. So the slower you go, the slower you can get to wherever it is that you want to go. And part of our impact, and something that Sedalia and I are really proud of, is the fact that we really took that barrier away. You need us at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're going to open for you. You need to work out a payment plan, we're going to trust that you're going to be responsible. We've grown so many of our local businesses to a level where they can now finance and get credit with other manufacturers. And I'm so proud of that. I mean, obviously it'd be great if they stayed with us, but they are going to grow and they're going to have work in other jurisdictions that we can't service. To know that I have helped, impact that, person's journey and taking those speed bumps out of the road is wonderful. And really it's why Sedalia and I do what we do.
Wow. So if I understand this, there's a two-tiered approach here, because on the one hand, you could be a subcontractor on a larger contract, mm-hmm. but you're also hiring smaller businesses, right, in that supply chain, and in so doing, you're helping them to become more viable, to scale, to become either investable or fundable by mm-hmm. a bank or other funder, because of the growth and the backing, quote unquote, of your company. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we have our services division where we GC the majority of our work. So we have a small subcontracting component, but for the most part, we're general contractors. And then we have our manufacturing arm, which allows anyone really to come into our plants and pick up material. And, to my point, I believe that you trust ahead of time. If as the person who has more capability to impact the world, if you're in that position, I believe that you have the responsibility to take the greater risk in mm-hmm. order for the benefit of the entire community. Because, at the end of the day, if you're successful and you're by yourself, wow, that is a really, really terrible shortcoming to that success. And I just would never want to be alone. So we thrive when we are able to bring everyone with us. I think that's the heartbeat of our entire organization, and everyone in it feels the same way.
So do you track those kind of effects on small companies? I mean, do you have a story around that?
We do. I mean, to my point, in the first year alone, we opened up more than 170 new applications for people who did not have previous credit, and now they have launch themselves. And when it comes to, for instance, when we're the GC on contracts, not only do we try to meet all of the MBE and WBE goals, but we try to exceed them. I mean, and whether any of our contracts have MBE and WBE or diverse goals, for us, it's not a question of us having to do it. It's a question of us wanting to do it, because the majority of our economy in the industry I'm in is diverse. Mm-hmm. Why would we not just naturally participate in that? It doesn't make sense to me. I think it's mm-hmm. part of our responsibility, but it's also part of not just our, legal, but our moral, mm-hmm. responsibility mm-hmm. to do right by.
No, I mean, this is sort of sits squarely in the whole notion of corporate social responsibility. Yep. With a deeper aspect, which means not only are you sort of donating to causes and engaging in the community, but you're actually building businesses. Right?
Well, we prioritize people mm-hmm. inside and out. I I personally believe, and my sister personally believes, that if we prioritize people, the profits will come, period. And I just believe that that's a core value to our organization.
And in fact, let me just go further to say that, yes, you're an established company, you've been around since 1985, but even small companies in their own way can hire one or two people or subcontract resources out. I mean, it's very good to be a vertically integrated organization and be able, you raised the point earlier, be able to sort of bring in-house all the ingredients you need to really function. It brings stability and self-reliance and so on. But the other side of it is that in the process, you also need to be mindful of growing the larger entrepreneurial community by engaging with smaller companies to help them grow as well, right?
Can you imagine if we all did it?
Right?
I mean, what a beautiful world, right? Isn't it just wonderful to be part of something that is extraordinary for everyone?
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me switch gears. This is really good stuff because it presents sort of a model for how businesses ought to operate out there, regardless of size, right? But I wanted to sort of switch gears a little bit now and talk specific about financing and how you finance a company through the years. You talked about your parents sort of bootstrapping and plowing profits back into the company on a consistent basis rather than incurring debt. So I wondered, at what point did you switch that formula and say, you know what, we need more money now that we can self-finance, so let's go out and see what we can get.
You know, we pivoted when we needed to scale. You can't buy an asphalt plant for a couple $100,000. You know, you can't buy a milling machine for, oh my gosh, I mean, you know, they're almost $750,000 between, you know, pavers and rollers and milling machines. When you walk by a construction event on the road, that's a couple $1 million worth of equipment, just equipment, right? So in order to capitalize those kinds of events, you really, it's not really much of a choice to incur or not incur debt. You must do so. And so again, because it was bootstrapped for so long, because we created credibility by paying all the bills on time and by being fiscally conservative when it came to the business. Then when it came time to go to the banks, there was history set. You know, there was a precedent of history, but not everyone has that. Not everyone goes through that journey. Many businesses, you need to capitalize them right from the get-go. And so I would say that regional banks, I know they're taking quite a hit right now, but they are the people that really understand the heartbeat of the economy. They're the ones that tend to stick around when things get really tough. So formulating relationships with your regional banks, I think, and by the way, I've had partnerships with, you know, multinational banks, and I've had partnerships with regional banks, and by far, I think that just having people who really understand the community and the community's needs and the impact, the specific impact to the local area, I think that's a really important part of the work. They tend to have more empathy in the equation. And of course, that's, you know, I'm saying a broad statement, but I think that my experience has been that. The other thing is that I really wish we had understood better right from the get-go is understanding how helpful the government can be. You know, there are grants, there are low interest loans, and it took us, you know, way too long to apply for SBA loans, for instance. Now, listen, the paperwork is intense, the documentation is intense. It is not, you know, something that you complete in a short period of time, because there are so many levers that need to be pulled and so many dots and T's that need to be crossed that it takes a minute. But I think what I would recommend to businesses today is that even if you don't need it right now, do your homework for when you do. understand the vehicles that are out there well ahead of time before you need them, so that when you do need them, not only are you able to be much more successful in a shorter period of time, but you also understand exactly what the expectations are, and you can strategically structure all of your priorities in your business to meet those requirements, right? I think if we were starting over today, I'd be very careful about where I located my business, and be very careful to make sure that I hired specifically from areas that have specific designations within, for instance, the federal space, like, you know, hub zones. And I would really count on, I would reach out much more quickly to you, Leslie, and to advocates that support small businesses and help create some clarity in what can be a fairly difficult and opaque system to work in. I mean, there are so many rules and regulations. They're there to protect you, right? They're there to protect our entire country. But in navigating them, it can be difficult. And I think that reaching out to the experts who really understand how to navigate, I think takes a decent amount of time. You know, it shortens the success timeline, if you will.
That's a very good point. So you're saying prepare for an SBB loan before you actually need it by getting your ducks lined up and actually hitting those important conditions that the federal government will want, like, you know, hiring people from underrepresented areas and so on and so on. Yeah.
Of course, you know, we do that naturally and organically within our organization, but it's just because we kind of did it naturally and organically. Our locations we could have done better. We could have been more thoughtful on the specific locations. The way that we hire are very specific to make sure that we're hiring as many teammates as possible from underrepresented areas and who just have larger challenges and bigger bumps in the road to surpass. But I think that just being able to reach out to economic development departments within the jurisdictions that you work in, I think reaching out to experts such as yourself, Leslie, I think reading and really doing your due diligence on and research on things that you may need in the future, I think it would significantly make you much more successful in terms of the financial aspect of obtaining the financing that you need. And I think that, you know, a lot of companies really turn to, for instance, when they're trying to get large financial injections into a company, and it works a lot of the time, but it doesn't work a lot more of the time, is just immediately going to private equity or VC, because there are a lot of things that are attached to going in that direction. I've had a lot of experiences with a lot of friends who went in that direction. It made a lot of sense, many of them in the tech, you know, world, but there are other difficult things that go alongside that. So if you're growing your business in an industry, maybe non-tech, that if you can secure as much of it on your own before an event like that, I think it makes a lot more sense, because you can still really run your business and create the mandates and the priorities that you would like to see as opposed to someone else. But there's a place for everything, right?
Right. Yeah. There are different models.
There are different models
for example, in this series, we've been looking at different models of financing. The first person we interviewed, she has successfully secured 2 rounds of equity investing from angel investors. Other folks have looked at self-financing. Other folks have looked at franchising, commercial banks, and so on. But you're saying basically that your experience, because you had this track record of paying things on time and you had your finances, you know, the track record of finances prepared and so on, it was relatively easy then to approach a bank to receive financing?
Yeah, it wasn't that it was easy. It was that we did it little bites at a time. And so
I see. So you build credibility.
we built it slowly,
Mm-hmm.
little bites at a time. And, you know, I think that's more the traditional model still for a lot of industries. But things like tech or items or widgets, if you will, that are highly scalable. I mean, obviously, then you have to go in a different route. You have to go angel or PE or VC. But you have to be really willing to, you know, you have to really understand what those components mean and what the are, because they're not any easier than, you know, getting the SBA loan, right? They're not easier. They're different. The scale might be different.
Yeah, but you also are giving up a part ownership in the company, which has other implications. Sure. But then on the other side, it also brings, or VC or angel investing can bring access to networks and, you know, mentoring and contacts and so on, that over and above what, say, a commercial bank would be able to give you, or a regional bank. So you have to weigh the pros and cons of different kinds of financing and seeing which is most appropriate for you and for your business at this point in time.
I think that when you approach things like angel or PE or VC, that you really need to have a pro forma that gives you a lot of control over the negotiation table, because it's easier to change banks than it is to change private equity.
Investors, that's true. That is very true. It's a marriage, right?
It's a marriage. It's a more permanent marriage.
It's a marriage.
I've seen where it's worked really well, but I've also seen where the entrepreneur proper has really struggled with the relationships because the cultural alignment may not have.
Absolutely. I teach a course in equity investing, and we talk about negotiations and the fact that you have to make sure that you select the right investor, no matter how attractive the deal might be. It's a marriage, and you have to make sure you have like mind, right? And so that you don't have someone who is running the show and you're sort of taking a back seat, and they're basically taking over control of the key areas of decision making. So tell me, what have been some of the challenges, sort of broadly, that you faced over the years, and how have you overcome them? Just give us one or two examples.
So I think I'd like to start that conversation with a couple of statements. First of all, when I started up in my industry, there weren't very many women. And so I had a lot of gentlemen who helped and who said, hey, you might want to think about doing it that way or this way, or maybe go there, not there. So I had mentors. I had to really search them out, right? And the other statement I'd like to make is that I chose the industry. They did not choose me.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You know, if you chose to be there, then you need to be solidly grounded in the fact that if most of the people don't look like you, they're probably not going to understand you. And over the years, it took me a little bit of time to understand that, right? It took me a little bit of time to understand that people do business with people who they like and they trust.
Exactly.
Well, how do you develop like and trust? You hang out together, you get to know. Well, if the people that in the industry that you're working in aren't the people that you're breaking bread with, you're going to have challenges because they don't know. And I think it's really important for us to take personal responsibility for our part, right? Are there challenges there? Yes. Are there ingrained, just prejudicial elements to it? Yes. Not even just the people, but the institutions themselves, right? Yes. But did you choose to be there? Right. And if you chose to be there and you choose to stay, then one of two things has to happen. Either you have to prove yourself beyond a reasonable doubt to yourself and to your team that you belong there, or you can get suffocated, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the entire ethos of it all. You cannot go into any business and assume that anyone else is really thinking about you and thinking about you in a positive fashion or a non-positive fashion. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what they're thinking about you. I think one of the things that Sadai and I did well was, we had our nose to the ground and we just kept at it. And no matter what the challenges were, no matter how difficult vendors could be, right? We didn't pay any mind to it. But that worked until it didn't, right? The thing is, if you allow someone else to write your story and you don't challenge that, then it becomes part of the natural story for the entire organism, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I wish I would have done differently, and I think my sister would agree with this, is that I wish we would have challenged the message, right? People didn't know me.
Mm-hmm.
We came into an industry that's very, very difficult to integrate into, but people didn't know me, right? And it was my responsibility to let them get to know me because I was the one who was coming in and mucking up the waters a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're doing that, I wish I had really thought about this earlier in this way, right? If we are the outlier and we want to be able to integrate, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our team to do our best to do that. Are you going to change everybody's mind? No, you will not. In fact, you will not change most people's minds. But if you change a few people's minds,
Mm-hmm.
people who are leaders in the industry, then you don't have to change everyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I could have done that better in hindsight. And I would really challenge and encourage anyone who's in a new business to really take a seat at the table. Don't walk into the room and don't sit in the second row. You're not in the second row, you're at the table. And you can't be intimidated by that.
Right. Well, that's a challenge for a lot of women.
It is.
Because they doubt their own value, their own importance and their ability to contribute.
Absolutely.
Right. And so they tend to sort of defer, to the prevailing viewpoint without sort of standing ground and saying, I have a right to be here, I'm part of this industry and I'm going to engage. Right.
Well,
so it's interesting. Go ahead.
So the other thing I was going to say is one of the things I think Sadai and I did really well is when we went on this journey and we realized we could really make something of this is back to the point of integrating into a system that's maybe not used to you, right? We really went out of our way to hire anyone and everyone that represented a difference of opinion, right? So when one of the biggest compliments that I get when people walk into our office, I've on numerous of occasions heard someone say, my gosh, this looks like the UN. Right?
That's a good thing.
Right? I'm so proud of that, right? We have every race, so many cultures, so many religious beliefs, so many diverse individuals in one form or another, whether it's, an African-American female, African-American male, Hispanic, white, blue-eyed, brown-eyed, green-eyed. We have all of it. And not only do we have it throughout our organization, but we have it in our leadership teams. So when you come to the table at M. Lewis, you have an extraordinary, robust representation of various diverse universes, right? Of people who represent different points of view. And we get to the table and we make decisions based on everyone who's at the table. And in my industry, that is very rare, right?
I can imagine.
Yeah, typically you have, field workers and maybe foremen and such that are of a particular culture and ethnicity, but then you have leadership that are completely from another one. And we really try to bring everybody together. I'm very, very proud of that. Because everyone has an equal voice. And I think it's important as you're building out your business. Are you building out your business? Is your constituent, does your business look like your constituent, right? If it doesn't, you need to fix that because you're not representing everybody that you're serving.
It's not only that, but I think the strength of a company lies with its employees, right? And so, I mean, diverse, yes, but the idea is to mobilize around a common vision of where the company needs to go. So you're bringing diverse thoughts and ideas, to, around that vision and different perspectives.
When we have leadership retreats, it's just extraordinary. There is no single ethnicity or culture or gender that dominates the table at all. I wish I had those stats to let you know right now, because we actually did them at our last retreat, but it was really an extraordinary moment to see how well represented we are for the people that we serve, right? And I think that's really important. I don't think you can just talk the talk. I think you have to walk it. And
True.
And if everybody, looks like, one, ethnicity, and then you're trying to serve, that doesn't make any sense to me. Never.
Right. So tell me, sort of before I ask my final question, sort of what's next for M. Lewis?
I think scalability. Is on the horizon. I think that there are, the first thing that we want to make sure that we continue to grow is our partnerships, right? And to be part of a community where we can bring really productive value to whatever it is that they're doing. So, on the manufacturing side, for instance, if I can provide you with cold patch or hot asphalt or recycled materials to help you better serve your job, that is a win for me, right? I'm business by making you more successful. Who doesn't want that, right? So our endeavor to, more and more partner with the industry to see where the challenges lie and how we can help is one of my strategic priorities. In terms of growth and opportunity, I think that there is an extraordinary amount of opportunity really for all of us. Remember that, generally fortunes are made during the downturns. It's not in the So the opportunities right now, we're in a bit of a downturn. So I think looking for the opportunities in the market where you can come in and be really, really helpful and save somebody's day. Those are, whatever your industry may be, those are the niches that you want to be looking at right now. And to that point, as we do go into what might be either a light or maybe medium-sized recession, cash is king. Right?
Yes.
This is a moment where you should be really fiscally conservative, and you should be, thinking about where you are extending funds and if that makes sense, because you can be as profitable as you want to be on paper, and good for you if you are, but if you don't have money in the bank in moments like this, that's not a good place to be. So
Wow, you're segueing into my last question, which is tips that you have for women entrepreneurs out there who might be watching this, based on your vast experience over the years. What are sort of 3 things you would advocate? I mean, you've touched on some of them already, I'm sure, but just if you can sort of bring things together with 3 points.
I think, going back to building an extraordinary, qualified team that represents the contingency that you serve, which means it's probably very colorful in every way, right? I think really building out the relationships for what you need 5 years from now, right? Due diligence, constructing priorities, and setting timelines for those priorities, and creating, not only your yearly plan, but your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, and building out different strategic components to make sure that you're able to execute in a consistent basis, and that you have alignment and alignment of vision and mission, right? For your organization. And then, being vocal, watching public policy. When we take a look at, the fact that it seems like every year we can't get the leaders of our country to even present a budget, let alone manage a debt ceiling. We don't want to build a business that way, right? If that would be out of business. So, really be loud in our vote to make sure that we are employing civic servants who are courageous. I think to a general degree, I believe all civic servants are courageous because they're doing work for the betterment of society, but they can get stuck. And usually they get stuck when they have to challenge themselves on their courage as to whether they want to keep their job in the short term or potentially lose their job.
Yeah.
It's all very understandable, but you want to hire people with courage. You want to see things like in my world, immigration reform, right?
Yes.
Of, it's really make a decision on what the rules are and enforce whatever they are. I think passing the buck, I'm a big proponent of having the ability to have contract workers like many other countries do. And in my business or in the agricultural business, we rely on a lot of labor, and we certainly employ locally, but I find myself in a position where I'm constantly seeking partners to come on board and be part of our team. And it is increasingly difficult to be able to do that. And then, we have an aging workforce. So I think the generations that are younger than us deserve our time and our skill set. And I think that we have an obligation to teach them our craft. And I think that we should be really thoughtful about that. So going forward, really, hand the baton on your knowledge and your expertise, vote courageously to make sure that you have decisions that are better for the entire community and not just for yourself, because everyone wins that way. And build a team you can be proud of that represents you and the community you live and thrive in.
That's more than 3, but this is this is awesome. So let me just see. So you talked about the value of the team, building a good team. You talked about partnerships. You talk about being vocal, right, and advocating and voting for folks who will advocate for not only your business but the industry. Have I forgotten something?
Well, I think they ought to vote for the betterment of the country, because if they vote for the betterment of the country, my industry will be just fine, and so will yours.
Right.
We're really thoughtful and responsible to our country because, you know, we see a lot. If you or I had organizations that couldn't come to consensus, we couldn't survive, and we should expect that of our leadership.
Yeah, I agree. But a lot of what happens out there in the political world is posturing, as you know.
Yeah.
So unfortunately,
it's at a huge cost to all of us, right?
So. I know. But also another thing you mentioned that I forgot was strategy, and having a strategy and working that strategy, a 3-5 year strategy or plan.
Absolutely.
And executing, right? And it dovetails into team, and it dovetails into partnerships as well, right?
It does. Yeah. I think just understanding where you want to go. And I guess lastly, a big thing that I didn't mention is when Natalia and I got, and this happens in every entrepreneur's evolution, right? You get to a point where what got you here is not going to get you there. True. And having the courage to bring on people who can get you there because you, for whatever reason, you don't have the expertise that is necessary to jump your company to, you know, that was a game changer for us. Taking the financial risk to employ people that you thought might do a better job than you, in hoping that it would work out. Very, very difficult.
Yeah, who are more qualified than you in particular areas. Because you don't, because one of the traps that entrepreneurs fall into is you try to do everything yourself, and it's not possible.
Exactly.
You gotta,
you cannot do that.
Right. Besides which, it's exhausting, right?
Yeah. If you're exhausted, you can't think straight. So
precisely. Well, this has been a great, wonderful conversation. It's highlighted a lot of issues actually that have not been highlighted in other interviews. I'm very grateful for that. I think you're the largest company we've talked to so far. And so I'm glad to see that you brought a particular perspective around longevity, building a legacy. Your parents handed off the baton to you, and you and your sister, and you touched a little bit about training future generations to hand off to them, which is very important. And then, of course, reinforcing the idea of teams, partnerships, building and supporting small businesses in your supply chain so they too can scale and grow. Very important. So this has been really an excellent discussion. I'm so happy that you could join us today, Natalia.
Thank you so much, Leslie. One last thing, I can't believe I didn't say this. For the women, help one another.
Yes, absolutely.
Help the young lady, help your counterpart. Make sure that as you are rising, you are lifting all the women with you, so that we can maybe, in my industry and in so many industries, normalize the fact that we're there.
Yes, absolutely. The more folks at the table, the better, right? And yeah, that's a huge issue. I'm just wondering, because your industry is very male dominated. I mean, is there some sort of group of women-owned businesses in construction?
Well, there's women in asphalt, which
okay.
So you have a bunch of extraordinary, savvy, super smart women who come into the business and they really understand the soft touch and they understand the dynamics and the particularities of the industry. And I think that they are doing just a fabulous job. But part of the reason that they're doing a fabulous job is that they support one another and they really, really applaud each other's successes. And I think they're just doing an extraordinary job. So very locally, women of asphalt, look that up. They're a dynamo.
Good. Thanks for that. Okay, so with that, we'll close. And again, we'll be in touch, Natalia. I'll be watching M. Lewis to see what you guys are doing. I mean, it's quite impressive so far. So I wish you the best going forward.
Thank you, Leslie. It's been an honor.